Hey, Davey here. Before we start the episode, I just want to give a quick ad and a shout out to the Historic Main Street Festival that's taking place on July 17th from 1 to 9:30 p.m. in downtown Alliance, Ohio. There will be 2 stages of entertainment, over 10 bands, live artist demos, free kids crafts, vendors, tours of downtown Alliance, food trucks, a car show, and so many fun ways to promote and celebrate the history of Downtown Alliance. That is the Historic Main Street Festival. That's taking place on July 17th, all the way from 1 to 9:30 p.m. So it's an all-day event. Get in when you can. So many great things to do while there. And yeah, that's all. On with the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Davey Squires.
Well, hello, Brad. Welcome to the Squires Station podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, doing okay. I'm excited for springtime and summertime and some sense of normalcy starting to come back. So that is a good thing.
Oh, yeah. Definitely in the music community, things are slowly starting to come back.
Yep. Well, and I think, if anything, I hope we have learned it's not necessarily a return to exactly how it was, but maybe a new way forward and some new values, new plans, and just like appreciating everything a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, I'm here with Brad Savage, DJ at 91.3 The Summit here in Akron, Ohio. And this episode is actually presented by Area 67 Studios here, also in Akron, Ohio. So, yeah, very, very local here. So,
yep.
Brad, how just from the beginnings, how did you get into radio?
Well, I grew up in the Twin Cities area in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and pretty much just always loved music and radio. We had good radio stations, and that's where I discovered all these bands that I like. So I was pretty focused on that, even from early high school, even from earlier than high school, even as far back as middle school. I remember thinking, like, I want to be on the radio. I want to play music. So I started really working towards that and doing, like when 9th grade came around, we did something called Shadow Day. And that was like where you go follow someone in the career field that you want to do for, instead of going to school one day. And that led to an internship at one of those stations, not immediately because I was too young to drive at first.
Oh, yeah.
But within a couple of years, and then kept in touch with some of the staff at those stations. And that led to, following people to other stations. And just, I learned early that a lot of the radio business had a lot to do with relationships and who you were friends with and what you demonstrated you could do and were able to do for their show or for their stations. And it was a lot of, like, early on, it was a lot of showing up at events and handing out stickers, and that's still fun even to this day. But so I basically started doing internship type stuff and then never left. just never left. And eventually, by about 2003, I think, I actually took a big step and moved away from the Twin Cities to go get a full-time radio job in Missouri, in Columbia, Missouri, and then bounced around a couple of times between then. From Columbia, that led to a job in Madison, Wisconsin, and then Ann Arbor, Michigan, all fairly quickly. They kind of came and went quickly early on. Well, after Ann Arbor, I'd moved to Virginia, to Charlottesville, Virginia, and worked there for almost 10 years. And then in 2015, I moved here to Akron to join Summit. And I think the main reason I wanted to come here was envisioned the creative freedom, the programming freedom, and public radio, and like having a lot more say in supporting emerging artists and indie music and local artists, and being able to play even more music, just a wider variety and a bigger playlist. So it's worked out pretty well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know you guys play just a wide variety of different styles of music on the summit.
Well, it's part of what I've done is kind of open up the width of the playlist. Like they were a little, when I came in, it was a little more centered on like, pop alternative, modern rock, whatever you call it. That's still the bulk of what we play. But I've just taken a look at other stations around the country that are like us, non-commercial adult alternative music stations. And so it meant like putting in more variety by the Clash and the Jam and cool old stuff, and like playing a little more of the roots and Americana groups coming out now. And that's a big, important sound now, so like adding in a little more of that and a little more left of center indie rock and even more big fun throwbacks, like 90s and 2000s throwbacks that like, that everyone grew up with. So I'm thankful to have a pretty wide swath of area to work with, and a pretty supportive team, including my general manager and everyone that's on the staff. Like they've been, slowly but surely, we've just, most of the time in radio, you'll see stations decide to shorten their playlist, or they're like, the ratings aren't high enough, so let's cut the playlist and play fewer songs and play them more often. And we kind of went the other direction. We've like expanded out even further, and that's proven very valuable for what we do on the summit. Like that's been really well received and brought even more music heads and musicians and just people who are like really into music and the record collectors and things like that. Like they've come on board and really are appreciative of what we do.
Oh yeah, and your guys' contribution to the local music scene, playing all these local artists, just amazing.
Well, so with that, I mean, they always had played locals and had them in the regular rotation. One thing that's new that we actually started when the pandemic began was we started the daily show 330 at 3:30, which the idea is every weekday, it's 33 minutes of locals in this special show. And then we still, of course, still play a lot of local music throughout the regular hours too. I think what I started to realize after I had been here in Ohio for a year or 2 years is pretty much all the submissions we were getting from local artists were very good, like just good quality material. And so we just started expanding the number of slots to play those songs. And like, so when I started, there were maybe 20 or 25 at any given time. And then we kind of like said, well, we can play even more groups than that. And now we're up to like 70 plus at any given time that are like in the library. And now it's turned into a ton of the local bands start kind of saying, when they have a song done, they'll email it to us and say, what do you think of this? Can we do a premiere? And then we arrange a premiere time for that song to play. And I let them know, and we don't really ask people to like post it on their own social media, but they're excited that their song's going to be played. Oh, yeah. So they will. And it just has really built this neat community halo effect, for the buzz of local music. But we wouldn't really be able to do that if the music itself wasn't good and stand up right next to anything else we're playing. And it really does. I mean, it really does. So I'm just thrilled by like, having a platform that we can do that and like doing more of it than ever before. And especially during pandemic time when so many bands had stopped performing, it was kind of a way to keep them in the public eye a little bit, So I think that's kind of why we started doing even more than ever during all of the, during the lockdown months, and then have just stuck with that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I know before the pandemic, you guys did events hosted by the station. Tell me about some of those that you guys done through the years.
Well, that's fun. I think that'll be coming back safely and slowly but surely. But so the first thing is, well, we had just moved to our new studios too. So we had been right on South Main, right near downtown or lower downtown Akron for years. But in November of 2019, we moved to a new facility over at Ellett High School. We're not like in a high school, but we're on the school campus. We have our own like section of the building that moved us from 2 on-air / recording studios up to 5. So we have a lot more room to do stuff now. And we have a brand new, what we call Studio C, for the in-studio performances. And, we did a lot of those pre-pandemic where bands would come in and do interviews and 3 or 4 songs, kind of acoustic, while they were touring or before a show in Akron or Cleveland or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
We brought a lot of that stuff online, but it's not as exciting online. We want to get back to having those visitors at the station. Well, we invite our listeners to the station for that. When you're a member, like when you become a member, you start getting invites for Studio C. So in 2018 and 2019, we did somewhere around 60 of those each year, local bands and nationals. I mean, it was one a week or more in some cases. So that was something, that happens at the radio station. But then, other events sometimes open to the public or ticketed concerts, and sometimes members only perks, members only free shows at, gosh, we've done them everywhere from Musica and Kent Stage to the Tangier, which is now transitioning into this new thing, but that's a cool old building over there. We've done some stuff even in Cleveland. We've had a few events that are like pre-show sound checks and meet and greets with the bands. So sometimes if like one that was really great was when the XX came in, like in summer of 2018, I think it was, and they played at Nautica, and we got to bring in it was small. It was like 20 or 30 listeners before the show to watch their sound check and record the sound check for radio playback. And then they came out and did photos and met everybody. And like, that was kind of a neat thing too, because that was something where we didn't have to, where the band couldn't come to Akron to do it at the station. So we went to them, and so we're flexible, and like a lot of special events. That's those are some of the fun things to put together. So I'm glad at the idea of that starting to come back, starting to get a little bit of emails and phone calls from some, from national artists that are like starting up touring again and wondering if there's an in-studio possibility yet. And we're pretty close to that. Like, I don't know, we may not be able to do guests just yet, but we might be able to start bringing back some artists to come in for interviews anyway, just with staff. And we're just kind of following whatever the health guidelines are and so forth. But those are the really fun and rewarding pieces of the whole job. So.
Oh yeah, and I bet some of those performances are just like, they're very memorable to you. They just stick out.
Well, when you meet someone like that, like, it's kind of like a great example is like, so the Summit has played Will Hogue for many years, and he's just this great artist that writes these heartfelt songs. And he's a producer too. He produced the most recent Red, One, and Blue album, and he's in Nashville, but comes by and plays in this area fairly frequently. And so a few years back, that was just one of my favorite moments. Was we did a private pre-show acoustic only thing on stage at Musica with him that we recorded, that we recorded for the radio broadcast. And I actually was just going back to that like 2 weeks ago and listened to that again. And just thought, like, what a nice guy he is. How cool that was, like that, just being such an important artist to the radio station, and knowing that, knowing that we kind of have this one-on-one relationship. Like, I'm not really calling him every day, but I know that I can email him and say, hey, you want to do something with the radio station again next time you're in town? And he's probably going to go for it, So.
Oh, yeah. So was the Summit the first independent radio station you worked at?
Yeah, I mean, the first like public radio station that I had been like a full-timer at. I've done some volunteer work in the past, like even so I was working like in Missouri. I was working at a rock station, like kind of like this, like a station that played like new metal. Like it was all like Korn and Godsmack, and that music's fine. It was great, but it wasn't my true passion. Yeah. So I set up and started doing one show a week on a college radio station there too, just as a volunteer. So I had some public radio background and certainly listened, but that's having the opportunity to start doing that as a full-time staffer, as like a program director, and most of those stations have pretty small staffs. That's I jumped at the opportunity, and it was that was to be honest, I'm so glad we're here and settled, and now it's 2021. But like when we moved here, it was pretty complicated. We moved here in the fall of 2015, and so that was like October of 2015. Soon enough, it's 2016, and in that year I had my son David was David's here right now watching. How old were you in 2016? You would have been 3 because you were born in 2013, right? Yeah. Yep. He's doing the math. He was 3, and so David was 3. We had our second baby, Simon, that year. There's David now. And then, so 2016, we had a young 3-year-old. We had a baby. We moved to another state and bought and sold a house and started a new job. Wow. So in looking back, that was a pretty stressful year. And I don't think we are going to do that again anytime soon, at least all of those pieces in one year. And I was like, we have to take this opportunity. And my wife wasn't super excited at the time about relocating and leaving Virginia, where she had gone to college and everything. And it just takes a minute, but it all eventually worked out. It's been a very good learning experience. And we've kind of reached a point now where I feel pretty settled, with the city and the radio station and how things are going, and like the audience we built and continue to build on the radio station. So.
Oh yeah, that's like finding the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow,
Right. Well, and I think I somehow thought that would be the case right away, because I had studied a lot of other stations like what the Summit does, the independent stations and stuff, and saw and the Summit was already successful coming in, but I knew that we could do more with new bands and indie artists and local bands and things like that. But it just took a minute to like A, start doing it, and then B, get people to, get some new people on board that weren't regular listeners before, just spread the word of kind of the stuff that we had started doing. And I think I envisioned that being a quicker process, but it took a couple of years. And now when I look back on those first few years in Ohio, oh my gosh, it was like just a whirlwind. We were so busy, and it's kind of like this big blur. But, and then the pandemic came and forced everybody to slow down a little bit. And that was kind of a big time of reflection. I feel like it was a time of positive reflection for me, of like being more grateful and appreciative of how things are, and like what we're able to do, and being so much more fortunate than could be, especially in a situation. Gosh, those were dark months when that virus started going around and we didn't know anything about it. And they were just starting to try and work on vaccines. And I feel like we're coming out the end, the light of the tunnel now, thankfully. Yeah. Well, and like, but I think we can also, I'm hopeful that we can also move forward and be, be more, just more empathetic and more grateful and just more happy with where everything has led, and what we've learned, and be a little more forgiving, and like just trying to be kind. That's an important thing, being kind to people. So
well, if there's anything positive to take out of the pandemic, it's to take life slower when you need to, and reflect on things.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I agree so much, because I think I personally kind of suffered from, like, you have to do this, and then tomorrow is this, and then tomorrow is this, and you didn't really celebrate the moment, or like I remember, like, I grew up listening to alt rock in the 90s, and I just love all that 90s era stuff. That's like one of my top eras for listening. Well, summer of 2019, it was like July, we had the band Sebadoh come into Studio C, and Sebadoh were like heroes to me in high school, because they're like these indie rock, they were never a super well-known band, but they've been going for 25, 30 years now. And they show up in this, little minivan, and it's these three guys doing long tours and all that. But that was like, to me, that was one of the biggest moments in Studio C, just knowing how much I loved that band back in high school, and thinking like, wow, these guys are taking time. They came in the morning after a show in Cleveland, and like, these guys are taking time on their way to their next city to come in and do an interview at this radio station. So that just really meant a lot to me, that we were able to set that one up. So, and then to kind of realize that that's like a day of work, it's like interviewing some of your favorite bands. So I kind of started to kind of realize how special that was then. And then when everything kind of went away so suddenly, and we didn't know what was going to happen, we just knew to stay on the radio and keep playing great songs for people. I mean, that was the whole goal. And now I feel like we can, at least just me personally, in like working with our staff and everyone at the station, and just the station existing, I feel like I can do that with more confidence than ever now, and that's a good thing. That's a powerful statement to have. So
oh yeah, I feel like radio too, during a pandemic like this, is one of the few things that kind of doesn't get canceled as much.
Yeah. Well, we've heard that from so many regular listeners too. We've heard, like, we always got nice comments and emails and feedback and everything. But I think more than ever, we got we would get these nice lengthy emails. Oh, you want me to hold the microphone? David wants me to hold this so it looks more even better. No, I think we kind of got like, people were more appreciative that we were there, and with playing new music that wasn't touring through the area, it became an even better way for people to find something new and discover a new artist or something like that. So it was really interesting to almost feel our value going up, or at least the way it was expressed back to us. We just got a lot of really, really heartfelt messages and and comments once all of that started up. So I'm really pleased with what we were able to accomplish, and then we're taking some of that new stuff along with us, even as things start to even out again. And I think that's great. I think it's kind of given me a little more freedom and confidence to be even more risky at times with the programming, like play something that's pretty out there that like, and just have faith that people will get it instead of going, the station is too weird, I'm not going to listen.
What is Brad doing?
Yeah. What are they doing now? Yeah.
Well, that brings me to my next question. I was really curious about this because I do listen to Cruising Through the Decades. And I was wondering how you find these songs from like the late 1800s. And
oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I had done something kind of like that back on my college station years ago. And then one of those sleepless nights during the pandemic, I realized that I started reading more about 1918 pandemic 100 years ago. And wondering, like, well, what were people thinking? What were people saying back then? And then I realized I have some of this music. Like there's crazy, like these compilations that I've loved for a long time that are just so interesting. They're CDs, but they're called the phonographic yearbook. And so there's one CD with 20 some songs for each year, and those start in they actually start in the 1890s. Wow. And then they have a single disc for 1903, 1904, 1905. So I started listening back to this in a new light because of what we were going through, and I kind of just thought like, well, it was actually like a weird comfort in a way that like, well, we made it through the last pandemic, so eventually we'll get through this one too. But I was curious to like hear what the song sounded like and what was popular culture at those times. And I'm a pretty fanatical music collector. And like, so I've always collected, I just love a good box set or like a classic blues or R&B collection, like especially those I have a lot of those collections that are like, here's the R&B hits of 1950, here's the jazz sounds of the early 60s or whatever. So I just started like digging through those, and I thought, how could I make a show that categorizes these all together? And that's where the idea kind of came from, and like at first I thought I was a little scared to actually do it.
Yeah.
I didn't even. It was funny because at that point, our whole staff wasn't there. Most people were working remotely, and any average day, it was just Andrew James in the morning and Chad in the midday and me at the station in the afternoon. And most of the other staff, we were just doing our Zoom meetings and things like that. So I didn't really tell anyone that I had this idea to start that show. I just kind of did it that first Friday, and probably in June, maybe it was May. But I just kind of started doing that show. And sure enough, it did connect and get the feedback, from people. And then it was like, okay, game on. I have a reason to dig through my collection and find unusual music, or better yet, a reason to go buy more of it.
Yeah.
So I started collecting. That's driven my collecting totally crazy in the past year more than ever. But there are some labels, like there's this super great historical label called Yazoo Records that was issuing. They did vinyl and CDs like in the early and mid 90s, and it would be like forgotten jazz of the 1920s and just super cool collections. So I try and acquire as many of these as possible. And then generally on Friday mornings, I just grab a stack of CDs and find interesting songs to put on that show. So I actually spend quite a bit of time doing it, and it's become a really proud feature for me because it's such a blast to to just find something that hopefully people that aren't frequently going and listening to songs from the 1930s or the idea is I'm looking for songs that would hopefully be of interest to people who don't follow that genre very much, and it becomes kind of fun and educational and really different that way.
Yeah.
I'm glad you like the show. That's great.
Oh, it's so cool. It's kind of like finding a gateway song into a genre, like.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, I'm a big believer in that too, because that is so much of that's a lot of what we do with new bands too, like a lot of new bands that come out. It's kind of about finding a gateway song, or sometimes more than one. But when it's a brand new act, there's usually a single that we play the most. And then it's really rewarding to me when someone like will kind of say like, oh my gosh, I discovered Churches on your station and now they're my favorite band, or something like that. Like that's really, I mean, I think that's like what we're supposed to do.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's good.
Oh yeah, definitely. So during your time at the summit, what have you kind of learned the most about the Akron music scene, would you say?
um Well, part of what I was aware of the station for many years just from radio circles and having met Bill Gruber, who I replaced. Bill retired. He was the program director and retired in 2015. That's how I was able to come in. So I knew the station, and I knew the Black Keys more recently, and Devo and Pretenders. And I even knew Joseph Arthur and some of those guys, but I really didn't know the Akron sound, punk history in the late 70s, Akron sound stuff, or or a lot of the other genres. And I think the biggest thing to learn was like how many artists we have in pretty much any genre you can think of. And just kind of learning the history. And then if you zoom out from there to do Ohio, greater Ohio, like Youngstown has its own great, cool music scene that's thriving pretty well now. And then just looking at the history in in Columbus and other parts of Ohio. Or I just found out there's this. I knew in Mansfield, Ohio, there was this band called the Ohio Express. Their big hit was Yummy, Yummy, Yummy in like 70 or something. It's like a top 10. But only recently did I learn that in that same era, Mansfield also had a group called the Music Explosion, like kind of a garage punk type band. And they had a 60s hit called Little Bit of Soul. And so I went and ordered their collection, their like CD retrospective, and I've been listening to them. I mean, so there's like, you're never running out of like neat stuff to discover from the history of Ohio music. And I just love getting to know the nuts and bolts of all that stuff. So.
Oh yeah, I'm just imagining in like 20 years you're gonna have like an entire house full of albums and CDs and just music.
It's true. Or my kiddos here might say we're already halfway there. The basement is a disheveled mess, but one day we're going to get it organized. So this is David's guinea pig that you see here now too. That's Nickel, and we actually have 3 guinea pigs. But yeah, Nickel is always a big popular thing. When David was doing remote school, she would often make appearances in his classes too.
That's awesome.
So, yeah,
it's like a class pet almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
That's funny. So throughout your career, I mean, spanning decades, what kind of has changed technology-wise?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of that in radio has changed. Like when I started, there was a need for most stations when I started had a live person in there playing CDs or vinyl or whatever 24/7. And there wasn't like hard drives and servers and stuff. And I remember when that started coming in, by like 99 or 2000, or maybe, I guess late 90s, that became more common, but it was still pretty expensive, the hard drive space and stuff to like put all the songs on a system. And it used to blow people's minds when they would tour the station and we would be like, look, this computer has thousands of songs, everything we play, and you could like show them the database. Well, now that's like second nature. Like everyone just expects that, So I think that has been one of the biggest changes, is like the technology, and the thing you have to be careful of there is like you can go too far where you depend on the technology too much. And like, a lot of the big stations now, in an effort to like, save costs and like not be, just or run more states. A lot of companies now have 5 or 6 stations in one building, and it's just, it wouldn't be cost effective to like have 24/7 operators on each station.
Yeah.
But you can overdo it in the other way, and then pre-record everything way too far in advance. Or if not that, a lot of music stations now, there are hours that they've determined that like are the less listened hours or something, like an oddball, like a 7 a.m. Saturday. And it's just song, commercial, song, and like they don't even have a host on. And to me, that's just kind of like a jukebox. I would much rather have someone announcing the songs or saying what's happening and things like that. So you can certainly take that to an extreme. But the technology has also made it possible for more stations to exist. And, so it's kind of a give and take. But I think that's been, the tech side at the station, and then the tech side from the recording world, and like from artists being able to like learn and get pretty good at their own home studio and like, recording music and submitting it. And those songs sound just as good. Like, you can have a pretty decent laptop and have a good recording studio that was like thousands of dollars, 15 years ago or something. So I think it's just all the tech stuff is generally made for good news, but it's still you still need that human touch.
Yeah.
We hear in the radio circles for our type of independent station, we hear the word curator a lot. That's like a hot buzzword, meaning the tour guide or the museum host that leads you through all this music. And I think that's a good explanation of what we do. And so I think if we keep doing that, that's something that like, none of the Spotify algorithms can outdo a real human who just loves music and wants to share it, or maybe they can get close with like, if you listen to this, you'll probably like this. That's a part of it. But like, I'm really pleased with how we're able to, to just figure out and make that work on a really impactful scale locally, or locally for this region. There's also listeners of the station all over the country now too, which is getting more and more common, especially with our, unique brands. Or we get people that like, we have some members that still pay faithfully as members that have moved away to wherever, but just to feel that piece of home or keep in touch with what's going on here, they continue to listen. So it's that's pretty rewarding as well.
Oh yeah. I think one of the better things to come out of this technology is just online listening, so you can just satellite, you can listen anywhere, literally.
Yeah. Well, we even have some people that like have using our station app, they'll like go on lengthy road trips to visit family. And like, I'm thinking of one family that drove to South Carolina and they listened to us the whole way. They just put on their phone the Summit and put it through Bluetooth in the car. And so it's kind of funny, like, when I grew up starting to love radio, your stations would fade out after 45 minutes or whatever, they only covered one geographic area, and that's not even the case anymore. So again, that's a good and bad, because we have to be unique enough that people want to stick with us, and we have to compete with virtually every station anywhere now, like, whereas it used to just be only the radio stations on the dial in your city. But now people can kind of seek out so much choice and variety. So I think that's where, being a good curator and representing the area well is so important.
Oh yeah. I think you guys have definitely cornered the market on having that human touch on the radio, in that radio organization.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, that's hopefully so. And like, I know it's going to get busy again as events, as music events start happening. And, I'm I'm pretty much ready for that, but I know it's going to be like, I think when the concerts start coming back frequently and the locals start playing frequently again too, it's going to be like any Friday night is going to be, you're going to have an option of many things around Cleveland, Akron, Youngstown to go see. But that's great. That's good news, you know. But it's going to feel a little different when that officially kicks back in, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, I think the scene is it's one of those cases when the pandemic kicked in, it's like you don't really know what you have until it's gone. And that's the music scene.
Yep. No, for sure. And like, you know, it's pretty supportive. I hope we'll continue to see that support from listeners and just fans. Like, most, I would say in this area, most everybody probably has like a neighbor or a coworker or someone, or maybe even a family member who's like in a band. And like, I hope when everyone feels safe to do so, they'll continue to support those shows and not necessarily expect to get on the guest list for free. You know, like we have to make it viable. You know, pay the $9 to get in or something. You know, like, no, that'll be important. Like to continue seeing all these bands do what they do. And like, I feel lucky that we live in a place that has all this music. You know, it's interesting. I feel confident in saying this now that I know the music scene enough around here. So I lived in Madison, Wisconsin, and Columbia, Missouri, and Charlottesville, Virginia for long enough to know the music scenes in those cities and get to know some bands and so forth. And each of those are cool, funky college towns. And they had some great bands, but by and large, I think we have more great bands here in Ohio, you know, here in Akron, Canton, Youngstown, Kent, and certainly Cleveland, that like, I feel like there's more quality long-term bands coming out in this area than those other funky college towns that you always kind of hear as like, that's where the music scenes really start, you know. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they have a ton of good bands, but I mean, here, like, I feel like if we've got 70 bands in our music library right now that are local between these areas, and I don't feel like any of them are like subpar, you know, like I don't ever really feel like, oh, we're only playing that because it's a local group, you know what I mean? So yeah. So I think it's a terrific music scene around here.
Oh yeah, and it's so diverse too.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we can start doing, you know, local music showcases and big specials and things like that once again too, once we get everything started up, you know, hopefully summertime or fall or whatever. And I want to give the bands that have been on hold for so long a reason to come out and play a show again, you know?
Oh, yeah. They've definitely been patient.
Yeah. Well, and how about you? Have you been doing any music stuff in recent months or?
A ton of recording.
Yeah. Yep.
Definitely a ton of recording. And I'm starting to book shows, a lot of festivals actually. Mm-hmm. And I'm very, very excited for that. That's going to be great. It's going to be kind of like a renaissance, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Well, and one thing I learned in like reading up on some of that history of the pandemic of 1918 is in many ways, that's what led to the swinging 20, the roaring 20s, you know, was like after this time apart and pulled back, people were dying to get out and socialize and have fun and enjoy music. So I'm eager for that to come about again.
Oh yeah, we can have our own roaring 20s.
Yeah, the new roaring 20s.
So it's the updated version.
Yep.
So I have one more question for you, Brad.
Yeah, sure.
What tips would you give to anybody going to school for radio or communication? What tips would you give them?
Well, now I think it would start, I would say first, like learn the technology and like all facets of that. So like learn how to do pre-recorded shows and like loading songs into the system and like any of these kind of computerized jobs. And like the social media part is a big part of it now. Like we're always looking for young, hopefully our interns can come back soon, because they were helping us out a lot with social media. Because like, I don't know, being on the older side, I understand how Facebook and Twitter work. There's new ones every few months now.
Yeah.
So, that's a bit, a big part of it is that social media world. And I also think like, it seems like what I still love about radio is the idea of a tall tower in a field somewhere, and the idea that the radio broadcast goes to everybody at the same time instead of on demand. Like on demand is great, but you don't feel that sense of we're all doing this or hearing this right now. So that's an advantage to radio. So when we find young people that have an interest in the engineering, in the tech side of how all that works, whether it's like computer networking, but even more than that, like transmitter towers and like running the transmitter wires and things like that. Like those are really, there's not a ton of them, but sometimes we'll get people that are really interested in that. And right now, a lot of the radio broadcast engineers have been around a while and they're nearing retirement. Heck, our engineer at the radio station, Jim Morgan, he's worked at that station for 38 years.
Wow.
And like he could have retired 8 years ago, but he chose not to yet. And now, but it's been actually, we kind of joke around like, Morgan, you can't retire. There's no young people coming in. We gotta find some. So I think that's an interesting angle. If you're interested, that doesn't necessarily mean climbing the 300-foot radio tower.
Yeah.
But although that's another field too. But I mean, I just find that stuff kind of fascinating. And if you have an interest in the circuitry of it, that could be a good thing too.
Oh yeah, definitely engineering.
Yep.
That's so interesting. I would not be able to do that. Those linemen who climb those giant...
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's terrifying. It's like, yeah, I get dizzy standing underneath a tall tower and just looking up, And there are some videos on like YouTube and other internet sites and some radio engineer groups that I watch, and like some of those guys that actually do, women too, there are women that do it too, although it's primarily men that like show off with these helmet cams and they're like climbing up towers 500 feet, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. So yeah, that is not the world for me, but I admire those who do it for sure.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Brad, for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. I love doing podcasts and just kind of learning how all this stuff works, and and just getting to know people a little more and telling my story of what led me to Ohio. So happy to do it. Yeah.
Definitely. So where can they find you guys at the summit?
Well, so the social media is at The Summit FM, or on Facebook, it's just The Summit, 2 words. And then we're 91.3 FM in Akron, Canton, and 90.7 FM in Youngstown, or streaming through like thesummit.fm is the main website. Or you can say, if you have like an Alexa, you can say, Alexa, oh, she heard me. We have one. I heard the ding. You can say, Alexa, play the Summit radio, and that'll bring it up. So yeah, but don't turn around. Yeah, tell her to stop, David. David's had a blast watching me do this interview. That's pretty exciting.
It just turned me on right now.
I turned her on.
Stop.
There we go. Yeah, so thesummit.fm is the main website and streaming platform, and listen on the good old-fashioned radio too when you're in the car. That's good stuff.
That's
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh yeah, dial that.
Daddy, no, it's something
Hey, you can find me on Instagram at Davey_Squires and on Facebook, Davey Squires Music. You can also go to dsquires.com for all the past episodes and bloopers. And that is it for this episode. Thank you.
Hey, glad to do it. Yeah. Thanks, Davey, and good to see you virtually. And keep on doing what you do with your music too.